Can we reproduce again? My sister wants to try, the sexy alien girl pleaded. The words echoed in the oppressive heat of the cavern, laced with a mockery that scraped against Jax's raw nerves. He wasn't in the mood for games. The crash, the capture, the cage, it had all blurred into one long, throbbing headache. He gripped the searing hot bars of his prison, the metal forged from volcanic rock, and glared at her. She stood just beyond his reach, a predator studying its prey. Her skin was the color of a twilight sky, a deep turquoise, and her eyes were molten gold. Long, black hair fell like a sheet of silk over the formidable armor that hugged every dangerous curve of her body. She was magnificent, terrifying, and currently the sole architect of his misery. You got a name, or should I just call you Your Highness of Head-Fucking Games? Jax grunted, his voice a gravelly ruin. A slow smile spread across her perfect lips. I am Zyla, and you are the off-worlder who trespassed on sacred ground. Sacred ground? Looked like a pile of worthless rocks to me, he shot back, testing the lock on his cage door for the 10th time. It was a complex, multi-layered mechanism, likely keyed to her biometrics. Useless. My ship's distress beacon is active. A rescue team will be here. No one is coming for you, she said, her tone flat and final. The atmospheric radiation scrambles all outbound signals. You are alone. With me. Her golden eyes roamed over him, an invasive, assessing gaze that felt more physical than a touch. He was stripped to his trousers, sweat plastering his skin, every scar from a lifetime of bad decisions on full display. You are surprisingly durable for a human. The crash should have pulped you, Jax scoffed. We're a stubborn species. Now, are you going to let me out of this sweatbox, or are we just going to stare at each other until one of us dies of boredom? Boredom is not a concern, Zyla replied, her smile widening. You are here for the trial of potency. You will prove your worth, or you will die. He stared at her. The what now? You were found on the eve of the proving. Our traditions are clear. Any male of fighting age found within the shadow of the first spire must face the trial. It is a great honor. Yeah, sounds like a real fucking honor, he muttered, rattling the bars in frustration. Let me guess, I fight some big ugly monster, and if I win, I get a stale cracker and a pat on the head? Her eyes glittered with amusement. If you survive the initial culling, you will face me. If you prove your potency against me, you will earn the right to be my consort. You will share my food, my chambers, my body. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy like the volcanic smoke. Jax felt a jolt, a primal spark of interest he immediately tried to extinguish. This was a trap, a game. She was a warrior queen on a throne of lava rock, and he was her new chew toy. And if I lose? She didn't smile this time. Her expression was utterly serious. If you lose, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr. My people will feast on what remains of your corpse. Jax felt the grit of the arena floor under his bare feet. The air tasted of sulfur and roasted meat. Zyla dragged him from the cage by a thick leather tether wrapped around his wrist, her grip like iron. The cavern opened into a massive subterranean city, carved directly into the obsidian rock, lit by rivers of flowing lava that crisscrossed the floor far below. Bridges of bone and metal spanned the fiery chasms. Her people, the Cathar, were everywhere. They were all tall, powerfully built like her, with the same turquoise skin and auras of casual lethality. They stopped their sparring and their work to stare at him, their golden eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. He was a specimen, a piece of exotic meat. Welcome to Cathar's Maw, Zyla announced, her voice ringing with pride. This is what you are fighting for. Right. The chance to be the only human in a city full of super soldiers who look at me like I'm their next meal. Sign me the fuck up, Jax said, his sarcasm his only armor. Your levity is a weakness, she stated, pulling him along a narrow walkway. Here, only strength has value. And what's this trial of potency bullshit really about? A glorified gladiator match to keep the locals entertained? It is how we ensure our bloodline remains strong, she explained, her tone taking on a ritualistic quality. A mate must be proven. He must show he can defend, provide, and satisfy. He must demonstrate his fire. Fire, huh? I was hoping for something a little more civilized. Maybe dinner and a movie first? Zyla stopped, turning to face him. She tilted her head, a flicker of genuine confusion in her eyes. Dinner. We will eat after the trial. But a movie? Is that a human endurance challenge? To watch something until you are exhausted. A test of stamina. It was so earnest, so literal, that Jax almost laughed. A crack in the stoic warrior facade. Something like that, he said, a smirk playing on his lips. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Her golden eyes narrowed, misinterpreting his flirtation as a boast. You claim you have great stamina, human? We shall see. The trials will test more than just your strength. She yanked the tether, forcing him towards a large, circular platform surrounded by roaring Cathar warriors. This is where you will face the culling. Survive this, and you might just earn your dinner. In the center of the platform, a massive gate of bone was groaning open. A low, guttural snarl echoed from the darkness within, a sound that promised sharp teeth and mindless hunger. Jax's sarcasm died in his throat. This was real. The ground trembled as the beast emerged. And for the first time since the crash, a cold knot of genuine fear tightened in his gut. He was unarmed, half-starved, and about to become the main event in a blood sport he had no chance of winning. The creature that shambled out of the darkness was a nightmare of claws and obsidian plating. It looked like a cross between a giant lizard and a pile of volcanic shrapnel, with 6 beady eyes that glowed with malevolent red light. The Cathar crowd roared its approval, their voices a thunderous cascade in the vast cavern. Jax backed away, his eyes scanning the arena for any kind of advantage. There was nothing, just flat, dusty rock. His name is Cindermaw, Zyla called from the edge of the platform, her voice impassive. He is hungry. No shit, Jax breathed, as the Cindermaw let out a shriek that vibrated in his bones and charged. His instincts, honed by years as a bounty hunter in the galaxy's grimmiest corners, took over. He wasn't stronger, he wasn't tougher, but he might be smarter. He dodged the initial lunge, the beast's claws gouging deep furrows in the rock where he'd just been standing. It was fast, faster than something that big had any right to be. He kept moving, a constant, desperate dance letting the Cindermaw tire itself out with missed attacks. The crowd began to jeer. They wanted blood, not a coward's footwork. Jax didn't care. He was fighting for his life, not their entertainment. He spotted a flaw. When the beast charged, it lowered its head, its 6 eyes momentarily blinded by its own armored brow. It was a tiny window. He needed a weapon. His eyes darted around the arena again, and he saw it. A loose shard of obsidian near the edge, as long as his forearm. He feinted left, then sprinted right, scooping up the rock shard. It was heavy, its edge brutally sharp. The Cindermaw, enraged by his evasion, bellowed and charged again. This was his only chance. Instead of dodging, Jax stood his ground. At the last possible second, as the beast lowered its head, he dropped to one knee, angling the obsidian shard upwards. The Cindermaw impaled itself, the full force of its charge driving the makeshift spear deep into the soft tissue beneath its jaw. It let out a gurgling scream, thrashing wildly. Jax was thrown clear, landing hard on his shoulder. Pain exploded in his arm. The beast staggered, blood the color of magma pumping from its throat, before it finally crashed to the ground, dead. Silence. The entire arena was silent. Then a single set of hands began to clap. Zyla. She walked onto the platform, her golden eyes appraising him with a new, unsettling light. Crude, she said, kicking the Cindermaw's corpse. Unrefined, but effective. Jax pushed himself to his feet, cradling his injured shoulder. Yeah, well, it's all I had. You are wounded, she observed, her gaze locking onto the deep gash on his arm. Before he could react, she was in front of him, her hand gripping his injured arm. Her touch was surprisingly gentle but firm. This will fester. She produced a small flask from her belt and poured a clear, viscous liquid onto the wound. It burned like a sun going supernova. Jax hissed, clenching his teeth against the searing pain. What the hell is that? Purifying sap, she said, ignoring his outburst. She began to bind the wound with a strip of dark cloth, her fingers working with practiced efficiency. The proximity was dizzying. He could smell the clean, metallic scent of her skin, feel the radiant heat coming off her body. He could see the faint, intricate patterns just beneath her turquoise skin. pulsing with a soft inner light. The pain in his arm was nothing compared to the electric current her touch sent through him. For a moment, the warrior queen was gone, replaced by a healer. It was a glimpse of another side to her, a side he found far more dangerous than her aggression. He was in her personal chambers. The realization hit Jax as the burning in his arm subsided to a dull throb. The space wasn't opulent, but it was clearly the dwelling of a high-status individual. The walls were smooth, polished obsidian, and the bed was a large platform covered in thick, dark furs. A weapons rack against one wall held an assortment of brutally elegant blades and energy projectors. There was an unnerving intimacy to being here, in the heart of his captor's den. He was a prisoner, yes, but a prisoner who had just been patched up by the warden herself and brought to her private quarters. The power dynamic was a confusing, shifting mess. "Better than the cage, I suppose," Jax said, breaking the silence. He sat on the edge of the fur-covered bed, testing his newly bound arm. Zyla stood by the entrance, her arms crossed over her chest, watching him. "You earned this reprieve," she stated, "but do not mistake it for freedom. You are still my challenger." "Right, the main event. When do I get to fight the great champion?" he asked, layering the words with as much sarcasm as he could muster. "When your wound is healed, I will not fight an impaired opponent. A victory without honor is no victory at all." "Honor," Jax scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Funny word. Doesn't mean much where I'm from. It's just something people say before they stab you in the back." Zyla's golden eyes narrowed. "Then your people are weak. Their culture destined to fail. Or maybe we're just realistic," he countered, pushing himself to his feet. He began to pace the room, a caged animal in a slightly larger cage. This whole setup, the trials, the ritual combat, it's insane. What happens when someone stronger comes along? Do you just get replaced? Tossed aside? He was deliberately poking her, trying to find a chink in her armor, a nerve he could press. He found one. A flicker of something, anger or maybe pain, crossed her face before being suppressed. "Strength is all that protects us," she said, her voice tight. "There are others. Predators from the void. Clans who reject the old ways. They see our rituals as weakness. They would see Cathar's maw burned to ash and our people enslaved. My strength is what holds them at bay. It is the only thing that matters." It was the most she'd revealed about herself, a crack in the stoic facade. She wasn't just a dominant warrior. She was a protector, burdened by a responsibility he was only just beginning to grasp. The air in the room crackled with a new kind of tension. It wasn't just captor and captive anymore. It was two hardened individuals from different worlds, recognizing a sliver of the same weary fight in each other. "So, you're afraid," he said softly, stopping his pacing to face her. "No," she snapped, her control returning. "I am vigilant." Same thing. He took a step closer, into her personal space. A dangerous move. Her hand instinctively went to the hilt of the blade at her hip. "You think you understand me, human? You understand nothing. I understand that being at the top is a lonely, shitty place to be," he said, his voice low. "And I understand you're putting on one hell of a show." They were inches apart now. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Her golden eyes were burning into his. The argument had become something else entirely. A raw, unspoken challenge that had nothing to do with the arena and everything to do with the suffocating space between their bodies. The day of the final trial arrived. The entire population of Cathar's Maw gathered around the grand arena, a massive circular platform suspended over a chasm of molten lava. The heat was a physical presence, warping the air. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Jack stood on one side of the platform, his healed arm feeling tight under the fresh binding. He was as ready as he'd ever be. Across from him, Zyla stood tall and imperious. She was stripped down to a minimalist leather harness, revealing the powerful musculature of her turquoise body and the faint glowing patterns that swirled across her skin. She held a single curved blade made of sharpened bone. They had given him a similar weapon. It felt crude and heavy in his hand. "The rules are simple, human." Zyla's voice cut through the din, amplified by the arena's acoustics. "The first to be disarmed and subdued loses. The loser submits to the victor. In all things." A shiver that had nothing to do with fear ran down Jax's spine. This wasn't a fight to the death. It was a fight for dominance, a prelude to a claiming. The crowd roared as a massive gong sounded, signaling the start of the duel. Zyla didn't hesitate. She moved like a blur, a whirlwind of turquoise skin and flashing bone. Her attack was a ferocious, elegant dance. Jax was immediately on the defensive, his own movements clumsy and brutal by comparison. He wasn't a duelist. He was a brawler, a survivor. He parried her strikes, the clash of bone on bone echoing over the lava pit. He was outmatched in pure skill, and he knew it. He had to change the game. He had to make it his kind of fight. During a brief lockup of their blades, their faces inches apart, he saw his chance. Her eyes were focused, intense, expecting a contest of strength. He gave her something else. With a grunt, he kicked a spray of arena dust directly into her face. She recoiled with a snarl of outrage, momentarily blinded. It was dishonorable, dirty. It was perfect. Jax didn't press the attack with his weapon. He dropped it, lunging forward and tackling her around the waist. They hit the ground hard, tumbling in a tangle of limbs. She was impossibly strong, trying to throw him off, her fists hammering against his back. But this was his world now, a dirty, desperate ground fight. He ignored the pain, focusing on a single goal, pinning her. He wrapped his legs around hers, using his weight and leverage to control her powerful thrashing. She was like a wild animal, rage giving her incredible strength. Her nails, sharp as claws, raked his back, drawing blood. He grunted, hooking his arm under her chin, trying to force her onto her back. The crowd was in an uproar. Some were screaming in anger at his tactics, others in shock. He had turned their sacred ritual into a street fight. Finally, with a last surge of adrenaline, he overpowered her. He rolled her onto her back, planting his knees on her biceps, pinning her arms. His body was flush against hers, his weight pressing her into the dusty floor. He was breathing heavily, his blood singing with victory and something more primal. He had done it. He had won. The arena fell into a stunned, absolute silence. He had her, the champion of Cathar's Maw, defeated and pinned beneath a human off-worlder. Her golden eyes, wide with shock and fury, stared up at him. And then, he saw it. The fury began to recede, replaced by something else. Something dark, hot, and utterly terrifying. Her breathing hitched. The glowing patterns on her skin began to pulse faster, brighter. A low growl vibrated from her chest, but it wasn't a sound of anger. It was a sound of raw, undiluted need. The look in her eyes was the only trigger he needed. Shock, fury, and now, this. A raw, dark hunger that mirrored the sudden, vicious spike of lust in his own veins. The trial was over, but the real contest had just begun. Her body, moments ago rigid with struggle, softened beneath him. A surrender. But it wasn't the surrender of a defeated warrior. It was the surrender of a dam breaking. The growl in her throat deepened into a purr that vibrated through his entire body. "You won," she breathed, the words a mix of disbelief and invitation. His mind was screaming at him. "What the fuck are you doing? This is insane." But his body wasn't listening. The heat from her skin, the scent of her, the raw power thrumming just beneath the surface. It was an intoxicating cocktail he couldn't resist. He lowered his head, his mouth crashing down on hers. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision, a branding. Her lips were soft, but the kiss was savage, a battle for dominance in itself. Her hands, freed from his knees as he shifted his weight, came up to fist in his hair, pulling him closer, her sharp nails scraping his scalp. Clothes became an inconvenience. The leather harness was torn away, his trousers ripped at the seams. It was a frantic, desperate shedding of barriers, there in the dust of the arena, under the horrified and fascinated gaze of 1,000 golden eyes. The world narrowed to the space between them. The heat of the lava pits, the roar of the crowd, the very concept of where they were. It all faded into a distant hum. There was only the slick heat of her turquoise skin against his, the tangle of their limbs, the harsh gasps of their breath. This wasn't sex. It was a claiming, an assertion. Every thrust was a statement, a continuation of the fight they'd just finished. He was marking his victory, and she was meeting him with a ferocity that stole his breath. her body arching up to meet his, demanding more. He could feel the glowing patterns on her skin pulsing against him. A rhythmic, hypnotic light show synced to their movements. Her strength was incredible. She wrapped her legs around his waist, locking him to her, driving the pace, taking control even in her submission. It was a chaotic, beautiful, terrifying dance of power and surrender. He was lost in it, lost in her. A primal part of his brain, a part that had been dormant for years, roared to life. This was more than conquest. It was connection, a raw, unfiltered line straight to the core of her being. The climax hit them both like a physical blow, a violent, shuddering wave that racked both their bodies. Jax cried out, his voice raw, as a blinding, white-hot pleasure ripped through him. But it was more than that. As the peak crested, he felt a searing pain on his chest, like a hot brand being pressed into his skin. He looked down, the glowing pattern on Zyla's palm, the one that had been pulsing with light, was now blazing like a miniature sun. Where her hand rested on his chest, a matching, intricate symbol was being burned into his flesh, glowing with a faint, ethereal light of its own. A mark, a bond. He collapsed onto her, his body spent, his mind reeling. The mark on his chest throbbed with a strange, alien energy. He could feel her shock, her confusion, her overwhelming, terrifying vulnerability. It was a psychic echo, a feedback loop through the new mark. From Zyla's point of view, the world fractured. The physical release was secondary to the searing spiritual finality of the Cathara, the life mark. It was a legend, a myth from the old texts. A bond that was said to form only when a trial was won not just by strength, but by a perfect resonance of spirit. It was never supposed to happen, especially not with an unrefined, sarcastic, impossible human. A wave of emotions she had been trained her entire life to suppress crashed over her. Fear, awe, a terrifying sense of being truly seen, of being known. She looked at the man lying on top of her, at the new, glowing mark on his chest that mirrored the one on her soul, and felt a profound, world-altering terror. The fallout was immediate. The silence of the crowd broke, not into cheers, but into a wave of angry, confused shouts. Jax pushed himself off her, scrambling back, staring at the glowing symbol on his skin. "What the hell did you do to me?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. It is the bond," Zyla whispered, sitting up. She looked dazed, her usual confidence shattered. "It is not possible." Elders in ornate robes were storming the arena platform, their faces masks of fury. "Abomination!" one of them shrieked, pointing a bony finger at them. "She has desecrated the trial. She has bonded with an alien stain." Jax felt a surge of protective anger. He didn't understand what had happened, but he knew they were in deep shit. He got to his feet, instinctively moving to stand between Zyla and the approaching elders. "Back the fuck off," he snarled. Zyla looked at him, at his defensive posture, and something shifted in her golden eyes. He, the human, her captive, was protecting her. The bond, the mark, it wasn't just a brand, it was a two-way street. She could feel the echo of his defiance, his loyalty, and it bolstered her own faltering resolve. She rose to her feet, her regal authority slowly returning, and stood beside him. They were a strange, shocking sight. The turquoise champion and the scarred human, naked, marked, and united against their own people. The chaos of the arena was a prelude to war. The elders' fury incited the more conservative factions of the Cathar. Ritual blades were drawn. But before the internal conflict could explode, the cavern itself screamed. A high-pitched shriek of tortured metal echoed from the main entrance, followed by the deafening blast of plasma fire. The cavern ceiling rained dust and rock. Xeno-mercenaries. They poured into Cathar's maw, clad in black environmental suits, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They were efficient, brutal, and firing indiscriminately. "The Vex!" Zyla shouted over the din, her eyes wide with alarm. "The scavengers who reject the code." So this was the threat she'd spoken of. The predators from the void. Jax didn't waste time asking questions. An elder who had been screaming at them a moment ago was cut down by a blast of blue plasma. The Cathar warriors, for all their strength, were in disarray, their ritual combat useless against disciplined ranged fire. "We need cover," Jax yelled, grabbing Zyla's arm and pulling her towards a pile of collapsed rock from the explosion. The bond on his chest pulsed, a warm, urgent signal. He could feel her fear, her rage, her desperate need to protect her people. It fueled him. They scrambled behind the makeshift barricade as plasma bolts stitched the air where they had been. "They came for me," Zyla said, her voice tight with guilt. "They see the bond as a weakness, a sign that I am no longer fit to lead." "Fuck that," Jax grunted, peering over the rocks. He saw the mercs' tactics. They were professionals using flanking maneuvers, herding the panicked Cathar into kill zones. "We fight back. Together." He looked at her. The dazed, vulnerable woman from the arena was gone, replaced once more by the warrior. But there was a difference. She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw not a captor or a challenger, but a partner. "Your tactics were crude," she said, a faint wry smile touching her lips. "But they were effective. What is your plan, human?" Their roles had reversed again. She was looking to him for strategy. He could feel her trust through the bond, a tentative but powerful current. "We don't fight them head-on. We use their own tactics against them. We need to get to their command unit, cut off the head of the snake," he explained quickly. "And we use this." He tapped the glowing mark on his chest. "I can feel where you are, what you feel. Can you do the same?" She nodded, her golden eyes intense. "I can feel your stubbornness." "Good. We use it. You draw their fire from the left, I'll flank them from the right. They won't expect us to be coordinated." She didn't argue. She didn't question him. She simply gave him a sharp, firm nod. "For the maw," she said. "For the maw," he echoed. They broke cover in opposite directions, a silent, perfectly synced unit. Their movements, once at odds in the dueling pit, were now a deadly ballet. He laid down suppressing fire with a fallen merc's plasma rifle, while she carved a path through their flank with her bone blade, a turquoise whirlwind of death. The bond was their advantage, a private, instantaneous communication line in the heart of the battle. They were no longer two separate fighters. They were two halves of a single, lethal weapon. The firefight was brutal. They fought their way through the shattered lower levels of the city, the bond between them a constant, thrumming connection. It was more than just knowing each other's position. It was an intuitive understanding. He knew when she was about to strike, and she knew when he needed covering fire. They ended up cornered in the ruins of a collapsed forge, the air thick with smoke and the smell of ozone. The main force of the Vex mercenaries had been routed, but pockets of resistance remained. For now, they were safe. "We did it," Jax breathed, slumping against a blackened wall. He was exhausted, bruised, but exhilaration sang in his blood. Zyla slid down beside him, her long black hair matted with dust and something that looked suspiciously like merc blood. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a quiet, shared intimacy in its wake. "We did," she agreed, her voice soft. "Your plan, it worked. We got lucky," he admitted, looking at the glowing mark on his chest. It was a constant, warm presence now, comforting in a way he couldn't explain. "This thing helped." "It is not a thing," she corrected gently. "It is a part of us now." They sat in silence for a long moment, the sounds of distant fighting echoing through the cavern. The walls they had built around themselves, captor and captive, champion and challenger, had been blasted to rubble along with the city. "I'm tired of this life," Jax confessed into the quiet, the words coming out before he could stop them. "Bounty hunting, running, always looking over my shoulder, crashing on this rock. Maybe it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Zyla turned her head to look at him, her golden eyes searching his face. He felt her surprise, her curiosity through the bond. "I thought you hated it here," she said. "I did," he admitted with a wry grin. Still not sold on the food, but he trailed off, not knowing how to articulate the feeling. "You're not just a warrior, are you? All that talk about strength and dominance, it's a cage, just like the one you put me in." She looked away, staring into the smoky darkness. "The title of champion is a heavy one," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Since I was a child, I was told I had to be the strongest, that any emotion was a weakness the Vex or our rivals would exploit. I have never had a partner, only subjects and opponents." She looked back at him, a profound vulnerability in her eyes. "Your defiance, Your refusal to break in the trial. I did not realize how much I craved it until you had me pinned to the ground. He reached out, his fingers hesitating for a moment before gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Her skin was warm, alive. So what now? He asked. The elders will still want my head on a spike. Your people are in chaos. Let them try, she said, a spark of her old fire returning. She placed her hand over his, where it rested on her cheek. The bond flared between them, a silent affirmation. They saw us fight. They saw what we can do together. The old way, my way, left us vulnerable. Perhaps it is time for a new way. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his. It was a different kind of kiss, not a claiming, but a promise, a question. We can leave, he offered. My ship can be repaired. We can go anywhere. She pulled back slightly, a thoughtful look on her face. And let the Vex return to finish the job. Let the elders drag our people back into an age of weakness? No. This is my home, and now, it is yours too. We will not run. We will lead. The Grand Cavern was a wreck, but the Cathar who had survived were gathered. At the center stood Jax and Zyla, facing the remaining elders. The air was thick with tension. Jax felt the hostility, the fear, the skepticism of the crowd like a physical weight. He could feel Zyla's resolve next to him, a steel pillar he could lean on. This human has brought ruin upon us, an elder accused, his voice shaking with rage. His presence invited the Vex. The bond is a curse. The bond is our future, Zyla's voice rang out, clear and commanding. She stepped forward, every inch the champion. My strength alone was not enough. Our traditions, rigid and unchanging, became a weakness our enemies could predict and exploit. The Vex did not attack because of this human. They attacked because we were stagnant. Jack stepped up beside her. He wasn't a politician, but he knew tactics. She's right, he said, his voice steady. Your warriors are strong, but they fight as individuals. The Vex fought as a unit. They had strategy. We beat them not just with strength, but with coordination. A blend of your power and my unrefined tactics. He looked out at the sea of turquoise faces, meeting their golden eyes without flinching. You can't keep the galaxy at bay forever by just being the toughest ones in the room. You have to be the smartest too. You have to adapt. There were murmurs in the crowd. He could feel a shift through the bond, doubt giving way to consideration. Zyla placed her hand on his chest, directly over the glowing mark. I claim him, she declared, her voice resonating with power. Not as a prize won in a trial, not as a consort, but as my partner. My co-commander, his mind and my arm, his tactics and our strength. Together, we will rebuild Cathar's Maw, and we will be stronger than ever before. It was a declaration of a new era, a fusion of two cultures, two worlds, embodied by the two of them. The elders were speechless, their authority broken. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with challenges. But for the first time, Jax felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Later, in the quiet of her chambers as they lay tangled in the furs, the weight of the day settled around them. The city was wounded but alive. Their people were looking to them. He traced the glowing mark on his chest, a permanent part of him now. Zyla watched him, a soft, genuine smile on her face. It is a good mark on you, she murmured, her voice a low, intimate purr. It suits you. He chuckled, pulling her closer. I'm still getting used to it. She nestled against him, her head on his shoulder. After a moment of comfortable silence, she tilted her head up, a playful, dangerous glint in her golden eyes. It was a look he was coming to know very well. My sister Kira, she saw our trial. She saw the outcome. Jax raised an eyebrow. And? Zyla's smile widened. She was very impressed by your potency. She wants to challenge you to a trial of her own. Then, her voice dropped to a pleading, mock-serious whisper, her words echoing the taunt that had started it all, but filling them with a new, intimate meaning. Can we reproduce again? My sister wants to try.